Good morning everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's video, as you can tell by the title, is a book haul, and it's quite a substantial one at that. I have been slowly but surely collecting, or acquiring maybe is the better word, some books over the past month and a half, I would say, probably. And now I'm here to show them all to you. It's quite a substantial stack, and I'm just gonna get straight into it. So, I went to a bookshop in the next town over yesterday with my dad because it was their last day of being open. Unfortunately, they're closing. It is one of those big chain bookstores, but the chain, or the parent company, I suppose, has had to close a number of bookshops across the country because they're not making enough money, because apparently people don't want to buy books. And so they've been having a sale for the past month. And yesterday was their last day, which is quite sad because I loved going to that bookshop and I always found really interesting books there. But such is the economy right now. So we went there yesterday. I got a couple of books. I also ordered a couple of books online. And then one of the books that I have is a book that a friend of mine wrote that is being published, or has been published. I'm not actually sure when its publication date is. I know it's sometime in August. I think it was the 12th of August, so I think it's out already. Let's get straight into it. I got a couple of really small books again. I got some more of those Penguin Modern editions, and I got a couple of other smaller books. So, the first one is We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I have had this book on my TBR, or on my want-to-read list, for quite a while, and yesterday I just happened to be browsing through all of the bookshelves. Usually I don't go through every single bookshelf. I also discovered that my bookshop, or the bookshop, this specific bookshop, had a poetry section. All these years, I've always thought they never had a poetry section, but they do. But it's under language and reference, which is why I never looked there, because I thought this was just books to learn languages. And I don't want to read a book to learn a language. Or I don't want to read a book about how to learn a language, basically. So I never looked there, but I found out that that's where they've been keeping all of the poetry and all of the plays and everything that I've been looking for so long. But anyway, this was not there. This was behind the counter where they keep their recommended books. And so yesterday I went through that section as well, and I found this book, and I'm really glad because now I can read this book. This will be my first Adichie, but I'm really excited to read it, and I want to read basically every book she's ever written. Then the next one I have is No One Is Too Small to Make a Difference by Greta Thunberg, and this is the new expanded edition. There was the original edition, and then there was this edition, so I thought, why not just take the expanded edition already, since it's there. I think she's a pretty fantastic young woman. So, there we've got those two. The next book I have is A Bookshop in Algiers by Kauter Adimi. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but I just pronounced it the way that I think it is pronounced, which is probably incorrect. But anyway, I bought this book probably 2 years ago now for a friend, and for her birthday, and I've wanted to buy it for myself ever since. And now, when I was at the bookshop, I thought, well, I'm probably not going to find this in a bookshop anytime soon because I won't be going to a bookshop other than the one I work in, and we don't have this copy, or we don't have this book. So I thought, while I'm at this bookshop, I might as well just buy the book since I'm there anyway. And now I have it, and I'm really excited to get to it at some point in my life. Then next up I have Jazz by Toni Morrison. Woo, Jazz is a little bit reflective. Jazz by Toni Morrison. I've heard people speak about this book. I've actually heard people speak about, obviously, all of her books because it's Toni Morrison. She's pretty well known. This is not the book that people say is their favorite, but this is a book that I've heard a lot of people say they really enjoyed. I can't remember what the one is that everybody says they love so much. But now I have a Toni Morrison. I actually have two Toni Morrisons. The other one is at the bottom of the stack, but yes. Now I have a Toni Morrison, and I can finally read her work. Then, when I found the poetry section, I went through every single book and looked if there was something that was on my list of poetry collections that I want to read. I found a poetry collection by Ted Hughes, and I flipped through it. I didn't even know that Ted Hughes actually wrote poetry, to be honest. I should have known that. But I flipped through it, but the poems didn't grab me, so I put it back. And then I went through some more, and I found this poetry collection, Selected Poems by Marianne Moore. I haven't really actually heard of her before, but I flipped through and I looked at the poetry and it intrigued me. It reminds me a little bit of E.E. Cummings' poetry. It's not as confusing, or as disjointed, maybe would be the better word, but it plays around with format and breaks words in half to make them rhyme in a specific way and all of those things, and I really enjoyed it. So, I have a new poetry collection in my ever-growing collection of poetry collections. Then I have a couple of these Penguin Modern Classics, or Penguin Modern Editions, I suppose you could call it. I have Television Was a Baby Crawling Toward That Death Chamber by Allen Ginsberg, which is also, I think, more poetry and some prose, and maybe an essay, I don't know. But I think Allen Ginsberg mostly wrote beat poetry, so I don't know if it's better to have it read out loud to you or to read it out loud to yourself, but I'm sure you could get the beat just by reading it in your head as well. So there's that. Then I have Of Dogs, Yuko Tsushima, Of Dogs and Walls. Never heard of Yuko before, but the back where they give a little synopsis of what is in this edition intrigued me, so I picked it up. I'm one day probably going to own every single one of these Penguin Modern editions. The first one, Penguin Modern Edition number 1, is Letter from Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King Jr. So I bought that one. This honking mass of a book, this tome, is the book that my friend wrote. It is called Misguided by Amie Whithouse. And I alpha read this book, so I've read this book before, but she has made some changes since I read it and gave my feedback. So I'm going to read it again. It's going to take me a while. It took me quite a while to read it the first time as well, because I don't read very quickly. But I'm really happy for her to have a book published. And hopefully soon I will be also a published author. Hopefully. Very hopefully. But I will try and find the link to this book. I think it's published by Austen Macaulay, so it should be on their website. So I will try and find the link to this if you would like to go and check it out and support my friend on her author journey. The next book I have is Western Lane by Chetna Maru. I bought 2 copies of this book because I bought a copy for a friend. And it's a very specific reason why, because this book centers around a family who the mother of the family dies. I think it's 2 daughters, the mother and the father. So the mother dies, and one of the daughters plays squash, and so the dad decides that they're all going to become really into squash. They're going to become a squash family, and I think throughout the book the girl becomes really good at playing squash, but it's also about how people deal with grief and all those kinds of things. But the squash element is what intrigued me, because my friend and I play squash together. And so I bought her a book about squash. I don't even know if she actually likes reading, but I bought her and me the same book about squash. And then this one is The Waiter by Matthias Faltbacken. I wonder if he's German. Is it translated? Hold on. Let me see. Translated from the Norwegian by Alice Menzies. Why do I feel like I've heard of Alice Menzies before? Or maybe it's just the surname Menzies. Anyway, so he's Norwegian. This is about a waiter in a very luxurious or expensive restaurant and kind of the people he interacts with, etc. I don't really know very much about this book, but I found it when I was ordering Western Lane, and it intrigued me, so I bought it. It was also on sale, so. And then the last one I have is Mouthful of Blood by Toni Morrison. It is essays, speeches, and meditations. This is exactly what it says on tin, a collection of her essays, speeches, and her meditations. I think there's a, yeah, it says a eulogy for James Baldwin in here as well. I'm now 2 Morrison books strong, and all the happier for it. I'm very intrigued to see how I go with this book and how I find her essays writing as in comparison with her fictional writing. I've never read anything by her, but I have seen many interviews and I have watched many of her speeches and things, and I love the way she speaks and I love the way she thinks or expresses her thoughts in her speech. So I'm assuming it will be quite similar in this, and probably also in her fictitious works? Wow, fictitious works. Fictional works. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. So, that's the last book on my list, and there you have it. These are all of the books that I bought in the last month or so, 2 months maybe. And now, I'm putting a book buying ban on myself. I cannot buy any more books from now going forward, with the exception of when I go to Pretoria at the end of this month, if we happen to go to a bookshop, and if they happen to have a specific book that I'm looking for, I might buy it. But otherwise, I'm not allowed to order books online anymore. I'm not allowed to borrow books from the bookshop that I work at anymore, because I'm trying to read my own books that I already have on my bookshelf instead of just borrowing more books from the bookshop. And I'm not allowed to buy, well, the bookshop in the town over doesn't exist anymore, so I can't go there to buy books even if I wanted to. So, from now on, with that one exception, that one trip exception, I'm not allowed to buy any more books, because I need to cull some of my books and read the ones that I actually have, because I'm moving later this year. And so I'm trying to read a lot of my own books, because I can't take all of my books with me when I move. All of that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this list of books. I hope I could introduce you to some new books. And if you have read any of these books, please let me know your thoughts on them, without giving me spoilers, please. And I will see you all again next week with another video. Bye.